Hey everyone, so welcome back. Douglas Johnson here. I'm a yoga teacher, non-dual teacher, meditation teacher. I'm also an ordained minister and a certified Kilobee inquiries facilitator. And I'm here to talk a little bit about the fact that you are always awake and always present. Before I get into the talk, as usual, I do want to thank my patrons on Patreon and everyone who helps support my teaching, whether it's coming to class or on YouTube, however you do so. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to talk about the fact that you are always awake and always present. This talk, you might say, is a rather advanced talk. So this is sort of for people who've maybe been on the spiritual path for a while. And perhaps they just have this sense like something is missing or something is off, or they're not sure, what they're supposed to do next in terms of their spiritual development. This may also apply to people earlier on. I'm not sure. This comes from a question that came up in a group meeting on my teacher's site, where there was a person there who said that her experience was that awareness came and went. And I tried pointing out to her that that's actually not possible in our experience. If you actually look experientially, how would you know that awareness wasn't present unless there was awareness there to report on it? So this is important because teachers like Eckhart Tolle talk a lot about presence, awareness, consciousness. And the way they speak, it sounds like awareness, consciousness, presence can come and go. And this is a convention that teachers use because before we're enlightened and embodied, it certainly feels that way. So I really want to emphasize that how we feel doesn't actually report on facts or actually what is happening as human beings. And this is a very important step to take in your spiritual journey if you haven't already taken it. Recognizing that I can feel that something is wrong in a situation where nothing is wrong. I can feel like someone is slighting me in a situation where no one is trying to slight me. I can feel offended when really there's no reason for me to be offended. I'd like you to take a moment now and just search your own experience and see if you can find some examples where that's happened to you in the past. Maybe you felt like someone was disrespecting you. And then once you investigated the matter a little more, talked with the person, maybe you found out that they actually weren't trying to disrespect you. Or maybe you felt like someone wasn't listening to you. And then again, upon investigation, you found that actually they just misunderstood or something like that. See if you can dig into your own experience. Make this really real for you, where you recognize, okay, here's a situation where I felt one way, but actually that wasn't the case. This is a very, again, important step for us to take on our spiritual journey, because as long as we use how we feel as the final measure of truth, we're going to have a lot of problems. So just because I feel like something is wrong doesn't mean anything is wrong. Just because I feel like someone else is, again, making me a victim, it doesn't actually mean that that's the case. And then in reference to today's talk, just because I feel like I'm not enlightened or awake or present, it doesn't mean that's the case either. So this is an important thing to understand factually. In Buddhism, it's said that when we become enlightened, we recognize that everyone's enlightened, and this is a true statement. So talking about enlightenment and not enlightenment is strictly for people who are not enlightened, people who feel like there's maybe a great gulf between them and the Buddha. And in a sense, there is. But in a sense, that gulf is really an illusion. But even though it's an illusion, it can be very harmful. In Eastern traditions, to illustrate this point, oftentimes the example is given of mistaking a rope for a snake. So if you are, say, walking in the dark and you see a coiled up snake in your path, of course, these examples come from ancient times, so this is probably not something you've experienced in your life. I think in ancient India or Japan, this would have been a common experience. If you're walking on a path at night with a candle, you might see something coiled up, and that might very well be a snake. So just keep that in mind, okay? So you see this coiled up snake, and you're about to step on it, and you jump back, okay? So let's just say that you see the snake, you jump back, and you trip, and you fall, and you hit your head. And so there's real damage created by this. When you come to, it's daylight, and you look, and you find that the snake was actually just a coiled up rope. There was no snake. So the snake was an illusion. It was a misunderstanding. It was a mistake, but it still created damage for you. It still actually physically hurt you because of that mistake. This is a lot like our experience with the ego and with this idea that, well, I'm not enlightened, or I am enlightened, or I'm not awake and I am awake, I'm not aware, I'm not present and I am present. So an important thing to understand about spiritual teaching like the kind that I teach is it really is factually based. It's not based on opinion. It's not based on philosophy. Opinion, philosophy can be helpful, but they can also be harmful because they can be turned into ideas or concepts that don't have a grounding in reality. So it's important to understand that for me, the definition of spirituality, real spirituality, is it's grounded in reality. It's grounded in facts. It's grounded in truth. And even though things like non-duality or Zen realization may sound very far-fetched, very fanciful, they actually aren't for the people who are teaching them. Again, if we actually look in our experience, hopefully we can see that these are factually based statements, okay? So first factually based statement, just because I feel like I am not present, not aware, whatever it might be, that is not necessarily the case. Okay, so just because I feel one way, it doesn't mean that that's the truth. We have to establish that. Okay, so again, just because you feel like you've been affronted, just because you feel like there shouldn't be war, or there shouldn't be discrimination, or there shouldn't be sexism, or there should be absolute equality, just because I feel a certain way, it doesn't mean that reality is going to be that way, or that I even have enough information to actually know that it should be that way. All right, so with this concept in mind, let's take a look at this idea of presence and being present. Again, this is a word that Eckhart Tolle uses quite a lot. So, is it possible for you to be in a situation to which you are not present? How can you actually have the experience if you're not present to it? Let's say you're having an argument with your spouse, okay? And you're screaming and yelling and you're both saying awful things to one another. Are you present or not in that situation? A lot of spiritual people would like to say, oh, I'm not present. That's why I'm yelling and screaming. That's why I'm upset. Well, that's not factually true, is it? The facts actually point to you are present. Who else is there if it's not you? Now, what Eckhart and teachers like him are pointing to in that situation is that another mechanism, what he calls the pain body, what in yoga we call samskaras or vasanas, has come in and essentially hijacked your being. And it is like a program that's running, and it has its own agenda. And that might be what's happening in that instance. Since working with my teacher, Scott Killaby, I'm a lot less inclined to say just because you're yelling and screaming, it automatically means that you're triggered. I don't think that that's the case anymore. But there's a good chance. A lot of times when we're screaming and yelling, especially if we do it a lot, chances are that we are triggered, we're in our pain body. So pain body, vasana, samskara, these are like programs that run, and you could say they're in the body-mind, the heart-body-mind. They're in the unconscious. We're not aware of them. And situations, people, places will pull that energy, that program up, and it will begin to run. And usually these programs are designed to keep us safe, to help us avoid conflict, or to win in conflict. So these are things that very often we learned in our family of origin at a very young age, and we've never really examined whether or not they're actually helping us in our lives. Oftentimes these programs might actually keep us from getting closer to people, to getting ahead at work, to achieving what we want to achieve in life. So they're very much worth becoming aware of and knowing that they are running there. Now, this is something that inquiry can help us with. Either you can do inquiry with a teacher like me, or you can learn to do inquiry on your own. Usually it's good to learn it with a teacher, to have some kind of methodology for doing it. But inquiry is as old as anything, meditation or anything else in spirituality. So it's not something that you absolutely must learn formally, even though a formal inquiry practice can be very, very fruitful and very, very beneficial. So I'm there, I am screaming and yelling with my partner. I'm taken over by this samskara or this vasana. Now, usually what happens when that happens is there's a lack of curiosity. There is a lack of questioning. There are a lot of assumptions being made. We're taking a lot of things for granted as truth, or our perspective tends to get very, very small. Now, what's important for me to point out here is that is a natural function of awareness or presence. Awareness can get very narrow. It's a natural function of it. It's not stuck in an expansive state. Now, generally, expansive states feel much better for awareness. If you think of being cooped up in something versus being outside in a beautiful space, a large space, generally which one feels better for you? I think we all know which one generally feels better. But having said that, being cozy can also feel really good, right? Being in a cozy space can feel very intimate. So it has its place. And it's the same with our awareness. So our awareness has this ability to dilate and to be very narrowly focused. And depending on what we're doing, we want awareness to be able to do that. We don't always want it in this expansive state. Maybe you can meditate and create an experience where you're always walking around in an expanded state, I have a feeling you will be limited in the types of things that you can do. This may be one of the reasons why in the past spiritual communities would often cloister, and people would be in, say, a monastery or an ashram somewhere away from things so that they could spend more time in this expanded state. As pleasant and as nice as that expanded state is, that's not really the end-all and be-all of awareness, presence. It can come and it can be narrow, it can be expansive. So generally when a teacher like Eckhart Tolle is talking about presence, he's often talking about this more expansive awareness where we can see that our perspective and our feelings is just one element making up a larger totality. And generally in spirituality, this again is referred to as presence, it's referred to as awareness, mindfulness. There might be other names for it as well. Again, this is a state in which awareness moves. It is one of many, many states that are natural for awareness. Awareness is not meant to be stuck in one state. It can't be. It just isn't in its nature. Awareness is aware of what is. So again, if you're having an argument and you're identified with your ego, your pain body, with your story, that is generally referred to as lack of presence, lack of awareness. But let's again look factually. Are you present? You're there. How can you not be present? If I were to say, raise your hand if you're here, if you're present, you would raise your hand. You're there. You are there. Okay, that's a factual thing. You may not feel very good. You might be identified with your ego. You might be yelling and screaming. You might regret it later, but you're there. Let's look at another factual statement. Are you aware? Well, when you later on report, I had a student who would do this. She would go into work and get triggered and then come back afterwards and report that she got triggered and she wasn't aware. And I would ask the question, who was aware that you were not aware? Who was aware that you got triggered? That's awareness. Now this is important again because people who really lack any kind of spiritual awareness, they're not even going to notice that they got triggered or that there was a feeling of a lack of presence or awareness. They just completely identify with the thought, with the emotion, and there is no space, you can say. So awareness becomes very, very narrow, and it's focusing just pretty much solely on an individual's thoughts, feelings, and that's it. So that individual's thoughts and feelings are the final word. And this is what we generally call lack of presence, lack of awareness, ego identity, unenlightened, however you want to call it. That's what we're talking about. But again, from an enlightened perspective, everyone's enlightened, everyone's a Buddha, everyone's saved if we're talking of A Course in Miracles. So what is the truth? They are present. What is the truth? They are aware, right? If I say, hey, how did you feel? They'll be like, oh, I was pissed. Now, they may not be able to recognize that just because they're pissed, it doesn't mean they had a right to be pissed. It doesn't mean they should have been pissed. It doesn't mean that that was the best approach to the situation. But there's still awareness there to report on the experience that is being had. So as much as we might want to believe that awareness can disappear, that awareness comes and goes, the truth of the matter is this is just a form of spiritual speech. The truth of the matter is awareness is always present. Presence is always present. We just don't always feel them or experience them or know that they are there. So at a certain stage in your development, again, this very often after maybe decades of spiritual work, of working on yourself, you may still feel like you're not always present or always aware. And at that stage, it can be very, very helpful to notice that factually speaking, it is not possible for you to not be present and aware. That may not sound important or impactful, but as a practice, it actually is at a certain stage. At a certain stage, it becomes very, very helpful to recognize facts, that you are always present, you are always aware, okay? Now, a lot of times the things that take us out of feeling present and aware is what my teacher calls Velcro. So these are emotions or thoughts that cause, again, a sort of unpleasant or negative sensation in the body that takes us away from that feeling of being aware and present. And that's what most of us are seeking, is that feeling of being fully present, being free, right? Enjoying life. So if you find yourself often feeling like you aren't present, you aren't aware, you aren't mindful in situations, then you may have work to do with embodiment. And so embodiment is what I call cleaning up. So some of you have seen my talk, wake up and then clean up. So waking up, again, realizing the truth about yourself and reality, which is subtle. Not going to get into that here, but waking up first and then cleaning up the embodiment. Looking into the nature of the contractions and the Velcro and the situations that we find ourselves Velcroed in. Usually there are unconscious thoughts that are causing the contractions and the feelings that we have. These are definitely worth investigating and cleaning up. And again, inquiry is a great way to do that. There are many tools you can use, yoga nidra, meditation to some degree, and which tools you use, which tools are right for you. Energetic work is another one, but which tools you use are going to be very much individual to you. And again, working with a teacher like me can be helpful because I might be able to recommend specific tools for you to work with. And your test, you might say, is the level of joy and peace you're experiencing in your life. So if you find yourself depressed, you find yourself heavy, you find yourself anxious all the time, you're not really enjoying the ride, then you may want to look at the embodiment. Because even though you're always present, right, that's just a factual statement. Even though you're always aware, again, another factual statement, you're always aware, you're always present. You might find that what you're aware of and present to, you're not enjoying. You don't like the experience. Now, a big part of eventually overcoming these things is learning to embrace them. And there are subtler and subtler levels of embracing the present moment. So for some people, trying to deny the presence of something, a sensation or contraction or something, is a bypass. So one needs to be really, really careful about not bypassing. But at the same time, again, having these passing feelings of expansiveness, of identification. In my experience, these are not bad things or problems. That we can expand, and we can, as awareness, we can expand, be very expansive, very open. We can contract and focus. We can identify, we can disidentify. These are all part of the natural function of awareness, and this is covered in the Tantric tradition, where these are the functions of Shiva. So please keep this in mind, that at a certain stage, it can actually be counterproductive to think that we're supposed to always walk around in a sort of expansive state, or a state of pure bliss or joy. Again, I find that while your life might be very joyful and very peaceful overall, I think that it would be really, really limiting and boring to always be in the same state. I don't think that's the nature of the form side of experience. So emptiness is form, form is emptiness. These are not really two, but one. And so embracing that oneness, not one, not two, we have to allow form to change and evolve. And awareness, we have to allow awareness to be able to focus or become narrow and to expand. It's just a natural function that it has. And it's not one that we need to be concerned about. And that concern may actually point to some confusion on our part about what we really are in our true nature. So the fundamental ground of our being is awareness, and awareness has this capacity naturally. And as a human being, you are holding heaven and earth. You're holding both. And so it really is learning to find that natural ease with moving back and forth between different states, and the expansiveness, the more narrow focus, identification, non-identification. Now, one area of concern for us might be if we're stuck in one or the other. So I actually don't think it's better to be stuck in an expanded state. I think this can lead to what one of my teachers called monk's disease, where we go into a grocery store and we feel overwhelmed because of the stimulation, right? We're too open, and we find the world just overwhelming because it's noisy and it's, full of egos and all this kind of stuff. So that's what my teacher called monk's disease. And it's not something we want. And again, it's called monk's disease because this is something that monks might experience. They live in a cloistered environment. It's controlled. They can always keep their awareness open. But that is not necessarily better than being able to switch back and forth. Your average person is stuck with a narrow egoic identity. This is also problematic. So as many of you have heard me teach in the past, what we consider really spiritual, the cloistered monk, for me, that's not the end game. And I believe there's plenty of evidence in the Zen tradition to point that this isn't really, we're not done if we're really spiritual. We're not done if we are stuck in or addicted to an expansive state of awareness. We really want to be able to shift and move back and forth. We want to be able to identify and disidentify. This is the natural state of things. And this is where I think joy and peace live for us as human beings. Where do we go after this experience? I don't know. Time isn't really a thing, not in the way that we conceive of it. So after, before, all this stuff really doesn't apply. It's about the present moment, and spiritual truths can be found in the present moment, even the present moment that you're in. So again, this is where these factual statements become very, very important. So when one is enlightened, they see everyone else is enlightened. Everyone else is aware. Everyone else is present. What we call enlightenment, what we call presence, is, you might say, the awareness of awareness, the ability of awareness to function freely in its natural states. So again, this is our true nature, and for our true nature to function naturally as it is, this is the end game of spirituality, from my perspective. Anyway, everyone, thank you for listening. I hope you found that useful. Again, if there's any way that I can assist you as a teacher, please reach out. I am doing a lot of one-on-one work with people these days. I find many of my students are at that stage in their development where, rather than going to another class or another retreat, that's not going to help them as much as working with me one-on-one. And while I do have a suggested donation for that, please don't let finances get in the way of you reaching out. I would like to try and help you if I can. So if finances are a concern, just let me know and we'll see if we can sort something out. All right, everyone, until next time, thank you for listening. Namaste, and have a great day.